Okay, yesterday we're learning about shchita, right? So you can't squeeze into liquids, you can't squeeze into an empty container, but you're allowed to squeeze into food. Now, what happened because of all this, because squeezing is actually, if it's grapes and olives, it's biblically forbidden. So therefore, Chacham said that what happens if you have a fruit that on Shabbos, liquid comes out of it by itself. It's called mashkim shazovu me'alehen. Nobody's pressing them, but either the weight of one fruit on the next, whatever. So those fruits, that juice, you're not allowed to drink on Shabbos either. Why? Because Chum were afraid you're going to drink that juice, then you're going to squeeze also. Similar to a din, you're not allowed to pick a fruit off a tree on Shabbos. It's biblically forbidden. It's the malacha, but it's called kreitzer, harvesting. You're not allowed to rip off anything that's connected to the ground. So what happens if you have a tree in your backyard and the fruit falls down by itself on Shabbos onto the grass, and the squirrels didn't get it yet, and the other rodents didn't get it yet? So the din is you're not allowed to eat that fruit on Shabbos. After Shabbos you can eat it. But a fruit that fell off a tree on Shabbos, you're not allowed to eat on Shabbos. Why? Again, the same thing. You might come to pick the tree off the fruit. Pick the fruit off the tree. Sorry. You might pick the fruit off the tree, so it's forbidden. So mashkim shezova me'alehen, basically you're not allowed to, what?
It fell before Shabbos, can you pick it up on Shabbos?
If it fell before Shabbos, if there's no maris ayin, that people think that it fell on Shabbos, you're going to pick it up, then you can. It's a suffix Rabbanim, so it should be mutter. Okay, so now it's like this. Squeezing, so until now we're learning about squeezing fruits and vegetables and that type of stuff. Now when you have, let's say, squeezing a garment. So let's say your garment gets wet. You walk in a rainstorm and you became very wet. So you're not allowed to squeeze water out of a garment on Shabbos. There's two problems with it. Number one is the malach of squeezing. And also, more so, because that's rabbinic, because it's not, you're not squeezing it for the juice. Squeezing biblically is forbidden when you want the juice. That's why you're squeezing it. Here you don't want to. It's still also with Rabbanim. But there's a second issue involved, and that is cleaning a garment. A garment that's wet, and you wring it out or squeeze it out, the dirty water comes out from what's inside the garment. So then not only are you squeezing, you're also cleaning the garment, which would be, again, biblically forbidden if it would be dirty. So, okay, so next is like this. You can't use a sponge on Shabbos. Now, the definition of a sponge on Shabbos means a wet sponge. A dry sponge is questionable in halacha if you can use it. But let's say you want to wash dishes. Okay, so normally during the week, use a sponge, let's say. Shabbos, you can't use a sponge. Why? Because inevitably you're squeezing the liquid out of the sponge. You can't squeeze water out of a sponge on Shabbos rabbinically, because you're squeezing liquid out of something that's absorbed in the sponge, so you wouldn't be allowed to squeeze it on Shabbos. So you can't use Now we learned the other day, what happens if you have a plastic sponge, and they're not closely tied together, like we said, steel wool, things like that. So then it's not squeezing, it's not absorbed, and it doesn't look like squeezing because it's not very tight together. So that you would be allowed to use on Shabbos to wash dishes. But a regular sponge you wouldn't be allowed to use in dishes. Now, what happens many times you have a sponge that has a handle, that you don't actually squeeze the sponge. But then also you can use such a sponge, it's very delicate, because you can use the sponge, but you can't squeeze it. So in other words, if you're washing a dish with that sponge that has a handle, you actually want to squeeze it. That's the whole purpose of it. So then you can't do it anyway. So practically speaking, you really can't use any sponge on Shabbos, or Yom Tov for that matter, because these dinim are equal Shabbos and Yom Tov as far as squeezing goes.
It's 100% synthetic material, there's not a little more like leniency?
What do you mean synthetic material? If it's synthetic material that doesn't absorb, then you're allowed to. If it's a synthetic material that does absorb, like for instance, polyester is synthetic, I believe, right? Yeah? But you could still squeeze out of polyester. If you have if you wear leather pants, okay? So leather pants, it doesn't absorb in it. So then you could, we'll see later, you can put a little bit of water on it. Or if you have, let's say, this is a plastic, right? So let's say somebody, for a change, spills their coffee instead of on the tablecloth that gets dirty. They'll be kind to you, they'll do it on the plastic, which is easier to clean. At least they're very careful not to spill it but they'll do it somewhere else. So, because this doesn't absorb, okay? So if there's a dirt spot, or if I have a plastic tablecloth, whatever, vinyl, not this material, but vinyl, whatever it is, and it gets dirty, so let's say there's a dirt spot on the vinyl or plastic, take a little water with my hands and wash the area, and then dry it with a napkin or paper towel or something like that, because it's not that wet that you're going to be squeezing the paper towel. I mean, you have to be careful. If you have a big spill, okay, and you're going to take a paper towel, this is your paper towel, and then you're going to, put it in, then it absorbs completely. You have to be careful when you pick it up. You hold it like this, you're going to be squeezing water out of it. 1 second. So then you would have to go like this. And then the problem is you spill water all over the floor. So you could have to put something like this and take it to the sink. But you can't squeeze paper towel either, or a napkin either. So it depends on the size. Or you can't use a rag. A rag is even worse, because then it's material, and then you're going to be putting water on the rag, so it's going to clean the rag. So all these things are involved.
As far as sponges for washing dishes and laundry, clothing, the material of the clothes, same difference?
Same difference. You're not allowed to use a sponge, you're not allowed to use... Years ago, people used to use paper for bottle stoppers. It's interesting, a lot of times in the Gemara, we have it in Bava Metzia a number of times, other places, the Gemara discusses what happens if there's a document that's worthless. A guy lends money and there's a document, and the document is completely invalid. And the Gemara is discussing, who do you return it back to? The lender or the borrower? So the Gemara says, what difference does it make? It's invalid anyway. I mean, it's worthless. So the Gemara says, Lo tzura pitz luchusei. Who can get it to use as a bottle cap? Because in the olden times, paper was expensive, and they didn't have corks like we have today. So people used to put bottle caps, and 1 second, on top of bottles. Now, if you have a bottle, let's say a bottle stopper, so a lot of times you want to take, let's say, a rag or something like that. Now, cork is not an issue, because cork is not going to squeeze you don't squeeze anything out of a cork. But if you have, let's say, a bottle stopper that's material or squeezable stuff, so when you close the bottle, you're going to be squeezing the liquid out of the, what?
You mentioned polyester is absorbed, so the other day we were talking about bathing suits, it's polyester, you cannot use it as
We were speaking then about nylon.
only nylon.
Nylon, vinyl, polyester does absorb, I think. No? It absorbs. I thought your things are way over my head. It's too complicated for my head. I don't get it. Okay, so squeezing paper that has a lot of liquid in it, you're not allowed to. Wetting a cloth, you're not allowed to, because you're again doing laundry, which would again be forbidden. So you have to be very careful when you want to wipe up a spill. That has to be done in a way that's halachically correct. If somebody pours a lot of water, somebody spills a glass of water on the floor, okay, you have to be careful when you clean it up. How you're doing it, it should be correct according to halacha. You can't use a rag, because then you're going to clean the rag by putting water on it. You can use disposable stuff, because that's not going to clean it. But the issue is then, you have to make sure you're not going to be squeezing. So it is what it is. People have to be careful how to do it. Okay, plastic tablecloth, we said you could do. Can't use sponges or cloth stuff to, okay, one last thing before I have to go upstairs. And that is, for instance, squeezing something out of a tube. Say I have a tube of ketchup, and I squeeze the ketchup or the mustard out of the tube, or whatever it may be, whatever you're squeezing out of a tube. So that's not called squeezing. That's not called squeezing on Shabbos. Squeezing is when something's absorbed in the material and you're squeezing it out of the material. It's not any different. You have a container of milk, you pour out the milk. It's the same thing because you're not squeezing anything. The milk's in the container, it's not absorbed by the container, and you're just pouring it out. So that's the same thing you're doing. It's, even though you squeeze the container, but that's not squeezing. Halachically, it's not considered squeezing at all. There might be other issues, that's not for tonight. There might be other issues, we'll learn in Mishnah tomorrow night. There might be other issues with squeezing out of a tube, but not as far as the law of schita goes, because you're not squeezing anything out of it.